Welcome back. It's the No House Advantage NBA strategy show for you here as we get you ready for a juicy 3-game slate tonight. Well, look, the good news is that there are tons of player props throughout for NHA for you to play tonight. Myself, Terry's in the house, Tyler's producing. Tell you about this great promo code. We're going to match $25 when you first sign up at NHA. You can't top that, especially because a lot of these tournaments here, very workable with that match, $50 total. Terry, my friend, always a pleasure. And we're back again to break down the NHA slate.
Back again. Absolutely. It's fun to talk about these different sites. You know, it's sometimes you get bogged down in so many things with the two main sites on the DFS side that it's a nice break to talk about all these different sites and the different kinds of action you can get over here. And I'm really enjoying them. I'm cashing in on some of the promos that we're running, turning it into some real money and rolling it up. So, you know, it's a good thing to take advantage of. We've got great stuff at the site for it. So I'm psyched to be here talking about it with you.
Absolutely, man. And that's a great point where everything we do, and if people have been hanging with us or they're new to Awesemo, you should notice a theme here. Whatever we're doing, and in this case, as you mentioned, No House Advantage, we have projections specifically for this site. And we also have, which is amazing, the optimal lineup page. And I'm going to steal a phrase from Terry, where we're essentially telling you what to do. Like it's not even, hey, these are options. It's basically the optimal lineup page is plug this in and you're going to win money on No House Advantage. We have reduced all of the thinking here for you on Awesemo.
Yeah, we make it that easy, and it looks like we just pushed a new update just before the show got started here.
Beautiful.
So we've got updated projections and the updated win rates on everything. So that's the way I like to put lineups together for this site. You pull up the optimal lineups page. Look like that needs an update still. We've got the guys working on that behind the scenes. Takes a little bit longer to crunch out all those lineups. But what we give you on that page, I mean, we give you page after page of the optimal lineup, starting from the best lineup you can possibly build with these player props based on Alex's win rates, all the way down through, you know, it goes like 15, 20 pages deep with like 50 lineups a page. So you can build more. There are more lineups there than you can build and enter on the site, I think. So it's pretty slick. You put that next to his win projections and you can just make money on this site. It's pretty slick. I like the setup we've got going.
All right, let's look. And one thing that we like to do here, even on a 3-game slate where you have a little bit more optionality, if I can steal a Sam Hinkie phrase there, and apply it here, we'll do the same thing. Doesn't matter if there's 12 games or 3 games. We'll go to our own projections, right, and sort for overs and unders. And look, not everything's going to be 100. Not everything's going to be top 90s. But there are certain props based on Alex's projections combined with what No House Advantage is offering where we already have, Terry, guys that are in the mid 90s, all the 3, I should say, looking like 3, including us on Whiteside, rebounds. And these are overs, 3 in that 90 percentile, if you will, of hitting.
Yeah, and that's what we always like to look for, right? There's going to be a wide range of probabilities here. It looks like today we've got some juicy ones to work with in the upper 80s and into the 90s. A lot of times we see, you know, just flat in the 60s because there's a lot to choose from. Things get spread out and they have more efficient lines. Today, looks like we've got some lines that we can take advantage of on this board. You mentioned, you know, one of the ones up at the top, Nemanja Bjelica. His PRA is sitting somehow at 6.5. Alex has him projected for an 11.8. Just looking at his averages in 15.1 minutes per game, which is around what he's been playing the last few, he averages 6.8 points, 4.4 rebounds, 1.8 assists. By my count, that's over 6.5 collectively, because the first number I said was over 6.5. So that seems like a pretty easy one to pick off. Alex has it 96.47% likely to come through, and that's only with Bjelica playing with a 15-minute projection in Alex's numbers. So it's not like we're projecting him for some 28-minute run that shoots him beyond expectation. This is just an inefficient line at 6.5. So I think that's an easy one to jump on off the top.
Yeah, we have it projected 96.47 shot that hits over. That's a 10-point play right there. It's got to be, right?
Yeah. I think that's just lock and load into your 10-point spot. It's 2 percentage points higher than the next highest one, which is also Bjelica. It's just his rebounds alone.
Right.
So, I mean, yeah, that's one, and we can only take him once. So I think that's one, you just plug that one into your top spot and go with it, because he's going to be, 3+ percentage points out ahead of that Whiteside prop. So that's definitely my top one.
Yeah, that's a great point. I knew you could sense me coming in and saying that as you said that, where we have a bunch of these guys where it could be, 3 or 4 of the same players' props are projected super high. Now that's on you out there to determine and kind of discern which one you like best. It may not always be the one that's the highest projected. I mean, if you look at it, PRA to rebounds, there really is a 2% difference as far as that hitting. I am curious, though, because it doesn't look like they're overwhelming. And sometimes we're lucky on a larger slate to have more guys in that 90 range. Is there a cutoff for you where maybe it determines how much points you're applying on No House from 10 as far as the strongest all the way down to 1, Terry? Or maybe just a cutoff in general where I like the LaMarcus Aldridge going over points, but Alex only has it as a 69% chance of hitting. That's below my cutoff number where I'll play something.
Yeah, and it's going to be relative each day. So it's a matter of scanning what the top of the board looks like each day, right? If you're on a day where the top plays are in just, the 75, 76% range, you've got a lot in the 50s and some in the 60s, then you can be a little bit more tolerant of something around 69. There are days where that could be a good probability number and one of the better ones you're going to get. With some that are smashing through the ceiling of that today, a lot into the 80s and into the 90s, there's a lot more to work with today, even on a short slate, which is a weird way to have it fall, but that's the case. So there's no reason necessarily to go down to something that's only 69% likely when we've got, let's just call it like 25 choices above that one when we sort by the probability. Aldridge is an interesting case today. He's been playing, I don't want to say a guy who's a 7-time All-Star, a 5-time All-NBA player in his career is playing above his head, but a 36-year-old who's been down over, the last 2 seasons, currently with a 64.7% true shooting percentage. Josh was talking about it in the chat, kind of going back and forth with some of the guys in there who were a little bit higher on Aldridge. And I lean more toward Josh's side. Seems like the old man's just getting a little bit lucky and is probably going to come back to earth a little bit here. So I question, I'm more on the boss's side where it seems like, he might get over that, but it's a little bit close for me. So I probably wouldn't be taking it with only like a 2-point fantasy point projection spread there. A little bit close for comfort. So I'm not sure if I would, 2-point raw point projection there, real life point projection. A little bit close. So could he get the extra bucket? Absolutely. Is it something that I'm comfortable dropping into one of these top spots with a lot of other options? Not necessarily.
All right, so we've built a 10-point play here right at the top with the PRA spot. The next highest percentage of the overhitting, that's not the name of a guy we just played, would be Hassan Whiteside's rebounds. Now, again, the NHA line at 3.5. Alex has him projected at 609. So that's a pretty strong shot, right? 93 on the dot percent that hits over. Are we looking at, Terry, a possible 9-point play here?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like, right, at 93%, you're taking the last one on the table that's in the 90s, and that's going to give you 5 percentage points clearance over the next one down. And honestly, the next 2 on the board are also Bjelica. So if you use Bjelica from that first one in that top spot, you grab Whiteside here, and then you're dropping down to the 87% range on a Patty Mills play, and then you get into some Mills and Maxey back and forth over the next few spots. So I think it's probably important to grab this one and just book it into that 9 spot in a lot of the initial lineup builds that you make. And you can move it around if you're building multiple lineups, but I think this is a prime spot for this Whiteside one. And again, it's another case where, it's a low total. It's a 3.5. Alex has him projected for 6.09. It's not like we're projecting him out for a significant amount of minutes. He's projected for 14 minutes, and Alex has him almost coming close to doubling up that projection. So I think it's a clear-cut one that we can just stick in there. He's got a 21.2% rebounding percentage on the season, averaging 7.6 rebounds in just 16.3 minutes. So we've got him clearly trending over that. I think it's a kind of a no-brainer plug and play in that second spot.
All right, so now moving down a little bit, and we'll hit some unders as well here because we want to maximize the 90 percentile first, I would think, as much as possible, right? And I know we're still waiting for some projections to come through on everything across the board on the optimal page. But
so it is actually, that is a good point, though. It is actually worth flipping. Yeah, it is actually worth flipping so that we can see the 90s on the underside, too. We were, I wasn't thinking along those lines when I was talking about it a second ago. So that's important.
You're stretching for an 82% over, my friend. I'm throwing you a lifeboat or life preserver, what have you there. So let's look at this. Toscano Anderson is sitting at 2 separate 100% shots that these things go under. His PRA is at 10.5. Alex doesn't even have him projected at getting one. Not even one. Like it's 0.86. So yeah, you run the simulation more times than not. He's getting one, but it's stopping pretty much at one on a good day. I would think. Now look, of the top 7 props that are designed to go under on NHA, my friend, 6 of them belong to JTA. So you have a choice now between multiple props, including, like, look, the difference between 199.77, 99.59, it's minuscule. You essentially have 4. Oh, no, James Johnson is one of them. I apologize. But you essentially have 3 at the top from Alex's projections that are telling you, go ahead, take one, choose one, whatever you like better.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about a guy who has essentially been ruled out of the rotation. Alex hasn't projected at 1.4 minutes. This is all assuming that he's even active tonight.
Yeah,
I'm just making sure of that. But as I'm poking around,
he's good to go on here at least. But you're right. I'm sorry, real quick. If he's inactive and we've played him, there's no give back.
Right.
Like we do this a lot on the NFL show for NHA, where we build up Thursday Night Football and warn people, hey, if Randall Cobb doesn't go and you played Randall Cobb, you're SOL.
Right. Yeah. You don't just get that under because he didn't play. That just comes off the table. Right. So it's definitely important to watch. But yeah, I mean, if we're just looking at what we've got on the probability board, like I said, Alex hasn't projected out right now at a minute. Does that minute come off the table and maybe he's inactive? Sure. That could definitely happen here. But if we're looking at these, grabbing any one of those when he's projected basically not to play makes sense and would be pretty easy to do. So those are simple. The James Johnson one is definitely on the table there as well, though, at 99. Let me see where Alex has him projected minutes wise. He's another guy who's,
I'm thinking, right, makes more sense, because why take the risk with a guy not even playing? James Johnson at least has to be projected for 5-6 minutes tonight, at least, right?
Yeah, it looks like Alex has him sitting at 10 minutes, and he's a part of the rotation, right? So he's a guy who's going to be at least on the court. You can have that idea that he's going to at least be active here. And
that's all we need.
Right, yeah, we just need the guy to take the court. And at an 8.5 PRA, Alex has him projected at 4.6. We're talking about a guy who in 10.6 minutes a game averages a point, 1.3 rebounds, and 0.7 assists. Not exactly doing a lot on the basketball court right now. So that seems like an easier one to pick off if we just want a guy who is going to play, is going to be a part of the rotation, and is coming in with a 99.5% probability of hitting that under. That seems like a pretty good one to book in there. And now we might want to reconsider, does that one go into the 10 or the 9 spot? Maybe we put that one into the 10 and bump the other 2 down a peg.
See, now we're getting into the meat of this. And it's not just, that's why you need the optimal lineup, of course. So you don't need to think that extra step, by all means. Look, I think of, you know what, to be honest with you, and again, hit that thumbs up button, please, to see new people popping in here. Make sure you're subscribed. We have 3 amazing channels for you, and take advantage of what's going on with this NHA promo, where if you're new to No House Advantage, you're following in thinking, all right, well, what's Terry talking about here today? We have a promo code, match your first deposit up to $25. You're already on Awesemo. You see everything we have. We have NHA projections, the optimal lineup page as well. I think you're right, though, my friend. I think we need to swap our 8-point play with our 10-point play and put James Johnson right there at the top.
Yeah, it seems like 99.59. You
hard
don't
to ignore
get
that.
Closer to a lock than that. So I think that guy goes into our 10, and I would just bump the other 2 down a spot, keep it in the order we had it, and move on from there. But yeah, that seems like a pretty virtual lock of a 10-point play there.
All right, let's look at a couple of other guys here. One that jumped out at me that's still in the 90 percentile range, that's workable on an underplay, Otto Porter's PRA. Now, we have him on site. Alex has him projected just under 10 at 9.85. The NHA line is 13.5. That's a 92.47%. Now, I'm not going to have Tyler go back and switch everything. He's already, dealing with us filling 10 slots in here. So let's not make him work any harder. But I think we found a pretty good candidate at the very least for a 7-point play, as we're looking at odds for both overs and unders. And it looks like that's the next highest one we can play. That's the only one left in the 90s.
Yeah, and it definitely seems like a good one. The only crux there would be if you get somebody like Andre Iguodala might, he's been a little bit banged up in recent games. So if he might sit, then you see it was a hip, I believe. Let me click on this. Yeah, it was a hip that held him out, I think, this past weekend. So if you see a guy like him come out, maybe Otto gets a little bit of extended run. But right now, where we've got him projected 14.2 minutes is a little bit less than what he's been getting in a per game sense, 16.7 minutes per game on the average for this season. He's had a little bit of an uptick in terms of his fantasy projection, 1.02 fantasy points per minute, up from his 0.94 last season. Seeing less usage, though. So I think with the downturn in usage and just a guy who's not doing a ton on the basketball court either, the 12% rebounding share, 9.7% assist rate, he's just kind of benefited from his 64.3% true shooting to start the season, averaging 6.5 points, 4.3 rebounds, and 1.2 assists. I don't think that gets us there unless he gets that extended run. So unless we see him trending up over like 20 minutes later in the day, I would be comfortable locking this one into at least the middle of the lineups. Even if it doesn't go in the 7 or the 8 spot, maybe you put it down in the 5 or 6.
All right, let me suggest one, and it's going to be a little counter to where he is as far as like he's not the next name technically, although he's not far down by any means. It's really just Patty Mills in front of him. But you brought him up earlier, and that's Tyrese Maxey. And what I really like here, it looks negligible as far as the difference is concerned. 2 points, maybe not even 2 full points, just over that, what have you, between his PRA and his points and assists. But as you know, and maybe others don't out there, don't let the point guard spot fool you. He's much more of a rebounder at this point than he is a consistent passer. Look, I think Alex has him projected at 24 PRA. You don't have Embiid tonight. You haven't had Ben Simmons at all. Danny Green and Seth Curry are way too volatile for me to rely on them. Tobias Harris comes back, but somebody else needs to score. Point being, Terry, Tyrese Maxey may clear 24 PRA with points alone tonight. We know he's going to play 40 minutes.
Right, and that's exactly where I was going to go with it. Averaging 40.7 minutes a game over the team's last 43 minutes last time, 40 and 39 in the game before that, and 40-something in the game before that. I can't scroll over far enough to see it, but I mean, the dude just is on the court all the time. So just on pure rate, pure math, it looks like it's pretty likely to go over that on the PRA. Like you said, Alex has him at 24.2. He's averaging 17.6 real points per game in 36.2 minutes. So if we're giving him a 4-minute bump on that, he's getting there on points alone, like you said. Whether it cracks 20 real life points or not, it only has to get over 18 and a half, and he's almost averaging that in 4 less minutes than he's been averaging season-wise versus the last few games. So yeah, that's one that seems like a clear-cut no-brainer. I know on a percentage basis this is just math, but like that 85% just based on what I just said feels low. Even though the math is, it maths out to that point, that's right, but it just feels low. So that's one I would definitely be looking at. It also might be a popular one, though, too.
Well, that's the thing, too. And we don't really talk about ownership per se, something like this in NHA, but the reality is you are competing with other people. And especially, and it's safe to say that we're a pretty popular site. And a lot of people are taking advantage of our projections. So you ain't the only one out there thinking you may have some sort of nugget if you're taking Terry's advice or other people's advice on site. But I don't know in a situation like this, and this is a conversation you and I have never really had, and I think it's valuable to know Al's advantage, but how do you factor what you believe to be something that would be a higher played, technically higher owned prop when we don't have ownership projections like a DFS slate?
So it's something where I just kind of take into account where guys are getting owned in some of the other sites, how much buzz is just going on around the industry. And that's something that you have to do for some of these alternate sites where either ownership is, maybe not as much of a factor as like the buzz factor if you're trying to guess a price on a guy, or if you're trying to guess where somebody's going to slot somebody in on a lineup card like we've got on NHA here, then maybe you take into account, all right, this guy's getting a lot of buzz. Everybody's talking about how he's going to be playing 40 minutes a game. We're running, 4 or 5 basketball shows today. I'm sure that point will be made on every single one of them. I know it was made on the strategy show. I assume Josh made it on the process show this morning too. Tyrese Maxey just going to be on the court. So maybe you take things like the buzz and the amount these guys are getting owned and talked about on other sites into account a little bit. And maybe you don't book them into the very top spots. You just move them around the lineup card. Or conversely, maybe you say, all right, it's an 85%er. Maybe that is one that slots in for the 6, 7, 8 spot for everybody else. So maybe on a few of these cards, I move them up. maybe I put him into those 9-10 spots because you are getting a guy who's going to very likely to play 40 minutes. You can rack up a lot of PRA in 40 minutes in a basketball game. So it's just the way I like to think about it. And it's not necessarily like, all right, I'm going to just raw fade that one. It's something that everybody's talking about. Just moving around your card and think about it like a lineup. Think about it and just putting it together in a somewhat unique way that's going to differentiate you a little bit from the field while staying really highly optimal and true to these most likely plays.
So the opposite may be Tyrese Maxey's backcourt mate tonight in Seth Curry. And I'm looking at our under projections here, sorted. He's at 85.39% to go under the PRA of 22.5. And I think what people will see is, wow, Seth Curry, 22.5 PRA. Are you kidding me? Yeah, look, I know he's the number one DFS player in the world forever, but he ain't always right all the time, thinking something along these lines. Then you start to look at it. Oh, he's shooting 50% from the month. Then you start to look at Curry. He's been ice cold over the last 3 games when they've needed him the most, mind you, over the last 3 games he's played. I think this is a great sneaky play that the public may just overlook, Terry, because it's kind of the opposite of the point you just made with Maxey.
Yeah, and he's a guy that I think people want to will him to success in a lot of situations. Yes. I'm guilty of it myself.
Me too.
Adam mentioned on the strategy show. Yes. Yeah, it's just a guy that like you just want to see him succeed. He's such a silky smooth shooter most of the time, but like you said, has kind of been a letdown when they've really needed him, and has let me down a lot this season. And when I've rostered him for DFS, just looking at what he's averaging, I highlighted the 3 columns here. His PRA average for the season is 21. No, wait, that's not averaging properly for me. Never mind. He's averaging 16.2 points, 3.2 rebounds, and 2.5 assists. So that leaves him slightly short, I think, if I'm doing quick math there, of that 22.5. Right. So I feel like that's
points,
pretty likely.
Sorry.
Say again?
The points, real quick. That was 16?
16.2 points.
Right. Now that's under. He hasn't hit 16 since the start of November 4th was the last time he hit 16 plus.
Yeah, and his line, and that's got his line sitting at 16.5 for just the points tonight. And Alex likes that one to trend to the under too by about 3 real life points. Alex has him hitting 13.2, coming in 76.35% of the time. Now, I mean, you're talking about a guy who's just a dead-eye 3-point shooter again. Yeah, that's pretty easy for him to make up a 2.7 point gap there. So keep that in mind. But it does seem pretty likely that one's coming in under based on where Alex has him projected, based on what we've seen. And it's not, again, like we're really shaving minutes off of him or anything like that. So yeah, I'd be a little bit concerned about that one as well. Alex has him 30.6 minute projection for the season, averaging 33.6 minutes, but over the last 3 averaging 34.5. So maybe it is taking a couple minutes away from him that's impacting that projection a little bit. But even if we give those minutes back, that's just pushing it to a coin flip.
So I was looking at as we wind down here, and again, take advantage of our promo code Awesemo, AWESCMO, and you're gonna get your first match on a deposit up to $25. I was just looking to see who the highest projected for the over, because we always like overs when it comes to 3-pointers.
It's just more fun, right?
They are, exactly, right? And that's why I get burned by Seth Curry betting his props all the time, because I don't want to sit there and bet unders for a 3-point shooter. But speaking of threes, Terry, my friend here, Nicholas Batum is the highest percentage of anybody going over 3-pointers made. Now, you don't have to do this. We have plenty of people above, but I was just curious to see what the highest projected over for a 3-pointer made would be. And it happens to be Batum, not 3-pointers made, but just the gap and the fact that it's 78. Still, though, seems a little too low with other people out there. I was just kind of curious more about the individual prop.
Yeah, I tell you what, I kind of like it. That's sitting at 1.5. Alex has him projected at 2.46. While you were bringing it up, I just jumped over to my per game board here, taking 5.6 per game, making 2.5 per game, 44.8% for the season so far over 12 games. That seems pretty reasonable. Doesn't really have to do a lot to hit 1.5 of those. And if he takes 5 or if he takes more than 5, I like him to make more than 1.5 of those. So that's another one at 78.2%. I know that's where the math is telling us that comes in, but based on that, it seems a little bit low if he's taking 5 and change a game. So I like that one.
Awesome.
And maybe not one that leaps to mind. I mean, not a guy that everybody thinks of as like, the best 3-point shooter in the world, and not one that I immediately jump to either in terms of just the nature of the prop as a threes made one.
Yeah, and that's why I think sometimes if you just sort by projections for over, projections for under, there's so many different ones, and a lot of them have the same guy that you may find yourself down in that high 70 range when you have everybody like, is there anybody that we missed? We covered a lot here, but I just want to make sure if you were looking at somebody that was a strong play, Royce O'Neal under rebound, anything along those lines. If not, and we covered it, that's great, but just wanted to see if there was a name or two that we should get out before we leave.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot in the mid-range in the 80s, especially when we're looking at the over. A lot going to that Golden State and Brooklyn game. It's the highest total on the board. It's also the most tightly projected in terms of the point spread. It's a 3.5 the last I saw. The other games were 7 and change and approaching 10 the last I checked. So if we're thinking in terms of a high-scoring, tightly contested game, that's kind of where we want to look for a lot of these. So a guy who stands out, he's getting a lot of buzz for being cheap across the DFS industry, and it looks like his PRA is on the board here. His points and assists, obviously, that becomes on the board. Basically, all his props are landing in the 80% range. Patty Mills becomes somewhat interesting. If we want to jump around to a different guy from a team that we haven't really brought up, Rudy Gobert with a 12.5 rebounds prop. Alex has him pegged for 14.83. So that's over an 80%er. So maybe one for the back end of a card there. Keep Rudy in mind. Guy that a lot of people just don't seem to like to roster in any kind of format. Spectacular player overall, just a non-exciting kind of a guy, I guess. So he's kind of a forgotten man to me a lot in DFS, goes under-owned a lot. And I think in this situation might get skipped there. So that would be one. Keldon Johnson would be another one. He's very buzzy around the industry as well today. So I would keep an eye on some of his as well.
Yeah, I think, Gobert's interesting. I'm just looking at his points. It's a 50. It's pretty sharp. Looking at Alex's projection versus NHA, 14.5. I'm surprised at that. It's not a knock on Andre Drummond. He's definitely going to get his rebounds, but there is no threat right now, real threat down low for Gobert on either side. And I just thought that might give him a bump on projection for points, but that's a pretty sharp number compared to what NHA has and what we have. So I'll let it be.
Yeah, it looks that's a good point though. I mean, he will have the opportunity to do basically whatever he wants as far as scoring the ball tonight, while Drummond might pull away from some of these rebounds. So I mean, thinking about it in terms of that with the rebounding prop there, we've still got him projected out, but it is stiff competition to grab some of those boards. So maybe it's a night you shy away from the Rudy Gobert one, or maybe you throw your lot in with the less likely point total, thinking that he might just abuse Andre on the defensive end of the game.
All right, everybody, we appreciate this. Thanks for hanging with us again. Make sure you hit that thumbs up button if you haven't on the way out, and you are subscribed. We have 3 channels for you, the DFS, the odds channel, and the fantasy football season-long channel. And use that promo code Awesemo, and we're going to match your first deposit up to $25 at Digital B21 for Terry. Thank him on Twitter when you crush this NHA slate tonight. I'm at Shander Show. Thanks to Tyler for producing, and you all out there have a great night.